Hi, this is Jim Ferrero, and this is class number 2 of 9 of the Intercombio Citizenship Prep class. Um, we have 9 classes. They're taught on Wednesday at 6:30. And if you should happen to miss a class, you know you're going to miss a class, notify us. Either call, send me a text or call Andrea Rodriguez, let her know. And videos are available for each of the classes, so you can watch them at your convenience to catch up. If you're watching this as a video and you have a question, send me a text or write it down and you can ask during the next class. Couple of things. If you have a question at anytime at all, send me a text, 720-660-5791. All I ask is that you let me know who you are. Put your name at the first of your text, and I'll get back to you usually the same day. The setting questions is how we shape these classes. Most of the subjects that are taught in the class, in these 9 classes, and are included in the handbook, generated from a question from a student. Been doing this for about 10 years, and questions are important. So please feel free to do this. If I use a phrase or a word in English that you're not familiar with, make a note of it and send me a text and I'll explain it. Of course, if you're participating in the class live, you can just interrupt me. That's fine. Um, so tonight we're going to be talking about the N400 form. We're going to go into quite a bit of detail, but the form itself, the ways you can apply, what are the advantages and disadvantages, the pros and cons of mailing it in or doing it online, the 2 different ways. We're going to go through the form. But the application form is a new form. It just was published the 1st of April, 2024. The old form had 20 pages. The new form only has 14. They've simplified things. They dropped off a lot of the questions that I used to think were unnecessary, and evidently they did too, because they no longer include those questions. They've made it simpler. There are some definite advantages to the new form, I think. One of the biggest advantages is if your income level is below a certain point, you can actually use the form to request a lower fee. And I'll get into that later in today's session. But on April 1st, a new form was released. N400 is the name of the form. And throughout these classes and in the handbook, we use the term N400, and it just means the application form to become a citizen. The form itself is dated, and in a little bit, I'm going to bring up a copy of the form and you can see, but there's a date at the very bottom of on the left-hand side, and that date says edition 04/01/24, and that refers to the current new form. If you're looking at a form, you got a copy of an application form and it has 20 pages, that's the old form. The new form only has 14 pages. That's the easiest way to tell which form is the most current one right now. But as I'm recording this, April of 2024, April 2nd, actually, you can use the old form into June. They'll accept both forms, but after June, they will not accept the old form. They will only accept the new form. It's probably a good idea just to use the new form from now on anyway. So effective in June, you have to use this new 14-page form that's referenced as edition 04/01/24. Part 4 of the handbook goes into quite a bit of detail about the how to submit and the form, and we'll go into that now. There are 2 ways to apply. You can mail it in. You can fill out the form and either by hand or type it in. And with just a few documents, usually, typically for most people, that's just a copy of the front and the back of your green card and your current marriage document. Your current marriage document, we'll get into that in a bit, is simply your marriage certificate, your marriage license for your current marriage, or it's a copy of your divorce document if you're divorced, or a death certificate if your spouse died. Or you can submit it online, and submitting it online has some advantages, and we'll go into that as well. Submitting it online is fairly straightforward, fairly easy. You have a prompt, you fill in the answer to the prompt and go on. But before you do it online, you still have to go ahead and you should fill out the form because all of the questions are the same and it makes it so much easier and faster for you to fill it out online if you have the answers in front of you. So either way, you got to fill out the form. But if you do it online, we'll go into some advantages. The good things, there are some advantages about mailing it in. There are more ways you can pay the fee. You can pay the fee by a check, a personal check, or a money order, or a cashier's check you get from the bank. You can also pay it by a credit card, debit card. So that's more ways you can pay. And also, if your income, your family household income is below a certain level, but that's 400% of the federal poverty guidelines. If it's below that level, you can request a reduction in fee. Or if it's even lower than that, you can request a waiver, which means you have no fee. You don't have to pay a fee at all. But the only way to get that lower fee or have the fee taken away because of your household income is if you mail in your form. Now, there's some bad things about it. It is more, starting in April 1st, it's more expensive to mail in your application than it is to do it online. The reason for that is if you mail it in, they have to take your form and everything you sent with it, send it out to a third party company that makes a digital file, then they can start using it in their application approval process. So there's added cost. And because they have to send it out to a third party, it has longer processing time. Besides just the longer time it takes for your form to get there in the mail, they have to send it to an outside third party who makes a digital file. So there might be as much as 2 weeks or 3 weeks delay before they can actually start working on your application. Also, when you mail in your application, you have to go through a separate step to create your online account, your case status account, which you will use to communicate with the USCIS during the processing application process. Your online account, your case status account, allows you to ask questions and for them to ask questions of you. It also allows you to get a fairly accurate projection of when your interview is going to be, and you can track that. Sometimes that date stretches out or sometimes it gets shorter during the process. So having a case status account is very important. Submitting it online, though, has some advantages. A good thing about submitting it online is effective April 1st, it's $50 cheaper to submit it online than it is to mail it in. And also, you set up your case status account immediately. That's the first thing you do when you start the online process. A bad thing is you can only pay with a credit card or a debit card. You can't pay with a check or a cashier's check or a money order. And also, you can't use it if you want to request a fee reduction or waiver because of your household income. So that's the downside. How to fill out the form. First off, download the instructions and read them. The instructions can be downloaded for free, of course, right from the website, the very front page of the website. When you click on that website is what's listed in the introduction to the handbook, www.uscis.gov. uscis.gov, G-O-V, /N400. That's in the introduction in your handbook. When you go there and you click on that, it takes you right there. Scroll down past the video, how to apply online, and there's a thing on forms, and you click on forms, and one of the forms you can download to your device or even print out if you want to are the instructions for your N400. Please do that and read over those. That's very important. If you are going to mail it in, only use black ink. Don't use green ink. Don't use blue. Don't use red. Only use black because the scanning process can only use black ink. Don't have any erasures. I mean, don't if you make a mistake, don't scratch it out or try to erase it or use correction tape or white out or whatever. If you make a mistake and you're filling out the form, you're going to mail it in, download another copy of the form and do that page over again so it's clean. So no markups, markouts, no X's, no erasures. Don't use what they used to call correction fluid or whiteout or correction tape. Make sure you're printing legibly. That means clearly that everyone can read what you've done. Actually, the majority of questions that get sent back via the case status account for people who have mailed in their application is one of the answers, they can't read it. It's not legible. So make sure you print clearly and legibly, all right? And only use black ink. Be careful with numbers. When you print out your form or you write your own form out and you mail it in, you have to put that, for example, your A number, the number that's on your green card, you have to put it at the top of page 2 through 14. You have to put it in the middle of the page on the first page, but you have to write that many, many times. And sometimes if you do that, you drop a number off or you flip a number or reverse a number. Be careful with numbers. Be careful with dates. All right. The dates have to be in the month, day, and year format. Month, day, and year. That's kind of an American thing. Most of the world does it day, month, and year, not month, day, and year. And try to use zeros for January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, where you have just a single digit 9 or for September or 1 for January. Make it 01 or 09 or 02 for February. Use that 0 as a placeholder. It also makes it do the same thing for the day of the month. The documents you need to submit with your N400 are pretty straightforward. For most people, when you send in your application, either doing it online or mailing it in, you only have to provide a copy of the front and the back of your green card. Make sure your green card is current, hasn't expired, by the way. Front and the back of the green card, and also a copy of your current marriage certificate, current marriage document. That could be your marriage certificate, your marriage license, or if you're divorced, the divorce decree from the court or divorce document, death certificate if your spouse has died. If you've never been married, you don't have any marriage documents, so you don't have to send anything in. But if you're divorced, even if you're still single, you have to send in that divorce document. If you're married, currently married, you have to send in that marriage document, okay? Where do you get a divorce decree? Well, hopefully you've got a copy of that. But if you don't, you can go to the court that issued the divorce decree, and you can get a copy. You have to pay for it, a certified copy of that divorce decree. If you got your marriage certificate or your divorce decree or the death certificate of your deceased spouse, if that's the case, happened outside the country and aren't in English, they need to be translated. All right. And this is something you can do. You can make a copy of that document And you can then right above the foreign language words, Spanish, French, Portuguese, Greek, whatever, you can Italian, you can write above it the English translation. For example, the word date in Spanish is feche. So you above the word feche, you would write DATE for date. The word for name in Spanish is nombre. So above the word nombre, you'd write NAME for name. That sort of thing. Translate the important pieces of information into English. And of course, if you don't want to do that or you're not comfortable doing that, you can pay to have a service translate it for you, but you'd have to pay for that. And they can do that. Um, Also, with any documents that you send in and you mail in, only send copies. Only send a copy of your marriage certificate or divorce decree. Only send a copy of the front and the back of your green card. Never send the originals. All right. Now, you don't want to bring the originals with you to your interview, but for to submit it, if you're mailing it in, only mail in a copy. If you're doing it online, you'll still have to make a copy because you would then download that copy that you made at the front and the back of the green card and save it as a PDF. And then you can download that PDF in the process when prompted by filling it out online. If you have a question about how to handle the documents, what's required, what needs to be translated, how to make a PDF, whatever, send me a text and I'll explain it if you have a question. And then the last document you will need to supply, of course, is the fee, the amount of money. Even if it's reduced, to cut it in half, you still need to provide that payment. They will not process your application unless you are requesting a fee waiver, unless you include your fee. When you do include your fee, if you're using a credit card, make sure that there is enough credit balance available on that card. And you can do that by calling the 1-800 number that's on the back of the card and having them confirm that there is at least the $710 or whatever his fee is going to be available on that card. Because if the card is declined for insufficient funds, the USCIS will not keep your application and try to put it through again. If it's declined once, you have to start all over again. They will just stop your applications and notify you that it's been your fee was declined and nothing is being done. So you'd have to start all over again with everything. So make sure you have enough available funds on your credit card if you're using a credit card. Okay. The documents are covered in part 7. As I say, only send in copies. Don't ever send an original. You won't get it back. All right. Put your A number, and the A number is the number that's on your green card. Put that A number and your name, write that on the back of each of the documents you're mailing in with your fee, with your application if you're sending it in by mail. Anything that's not in English has to be translated. All right. And you can do that yourself, or you can pay to have somebody do it, but it has to be translated, any document you send in. All right. The fee. Tell you what, I think I'm gonna stop that, and I'm gonna actually pull up the form itself and share that with you and go through the form now, and then I'll get into the fee. Okay. Uh, all right. So the N400 form, make this a little bit larger so you can see it. The N400 form, if you look down here, all right, N400 edition 04/01/24, and the fact that it has 14 pages, that tells you you're working with the newest form. If you find a form that doesn't say 04/01/24. It might reference something from 2019, and it says 20 pages. That's the old form. All right. The easiest way to tell, do you have the new form or the old form, is how many pages does it have? Okay. So up here at the top, leave that blank. That's for them to fill in. You're really going to start where it says start and read the instructions. Type or print in black ink only. That's if you are sending this in, mailing it in. If you're a parent, even if that is a legal adopted parent, is a US citizen by birth or was naturalized before you turned 18 years old, maybe you don't need to be filling this out. You need to confer with an attorney if that's the case, or go to uscis.gov/in 600, not 400, 600. And look at that. It may be that you're already a citizen. I think you probably know by now if that was the case, but that's just one more check before you get into this process. So part one, there are 16 parts, I believe. And on this front page, this is where you would fill in that 9-digit number that's on your green card. It's called your A number. All right. On the following pages, it's up here at the top where you put that number. Very first one, you have to check the reason for filing. And the reason is general provision, which means you fit the requirements, the eligibility requirements. You're 18 years of age or older. You've been in the country for 5 years or 3 years if you've been married to a US citizen for those whole 3 years. And that would be A, you check. You only have to check one of these. But if you're the spouse of a US citizen, if you've been married and for the 3 years, this is where you would check here. You're married to a US citizen, and that means they have been a US citizen for that whole 3 years, and you've been married. The entire time you were married, they were a citizen, and you've been living with them. That's the requirement. You have to live with them. They have to have been a US citizen for the full 3 years, and both of you have to have been in the United States. That means then you could apply after 3 years as opposed to 5. Everyone else, 5. C, D, E, F, and G are all special situations that if you think you apply to any one of these, send me a text. We can talk about it. And if you need to talk to a lawyer, I can point you in that direction. But most people are checking A or B. Information about you, part 2, your current legal name. Your current legal name. That would be the name that's, that is on your birth certificate or your marriage certificate if you're a woman and married a man and you've taken his name. But the family name, your last name, given name is your first name and your middle name if you have one. All right. Other names that you've used since birth. And here is where you would use maybe a nickname. A nickname is a shortened version of your first name. For example, my name is James Ferrero, but everyone calls me Jim. Jim is my nickname. So if I was filling this out, I would have Ferrero, James, Frank. My family name down here under part 2 would be Ferrero, Jim. Okay. Or maybe your nickname is something that people just knew you by. Gordo, maybe, or I don't know, something that, but is not the name that's on your legal birth certificate, passport, green card, that sort of thing. But also other names that you may have used since birth might be a name that you used. Here's where if a woman, when she got married, took her husband's name, she would put her maiden name down here. So maybe when she took her her husband's name, she took his name and that was a family name. But down here would be the name that she used before she got married. Um, Name change. This is optional. This thing right here, this name change. And that really refers to going before a judge and having your name changed by court at your request, or you're in the process of doing that. It doesn't refer to a woman who takes her husband's name, if that makes sense. Number four is this USCIS online account number, if you already have one. It's possible you do. Maybe you started this whole process uh, outside the country at a consulate or something. But most people don't already have an account number. And if you don't have one, you put NA for not applicable. Um, Gender, this is something else they've changed. They've added a third option if that's your choice to identify as something besides a male or a female. You can now do that. Your date of birth, and again, remember it's month, day, and year. Month, day, and year format. Um, and then if you are a lawful permanent resident because you have a green card, provide the date you got your green card, and that is listed on your green card, by the way. You can pull that off that. Your country of birth, your country of citizenship, even if it's the same, list them both, or if it's different, you'd list them differently. If you are a citizen or national of more than one country, you list those on Part 14. There's a place on Part 14 where you can provide additional information. And throughout this whole form, I'm going to be referencing providing additional information on Part 14. And when you do, you have to reference the page number, page 2, the part number, part 2, and the item number, which would be 9. And then you would list additional. It's possible. I have a friend who is born in Mexico, became a U.S. citizen, but before he became a U.S. citizen, he married a Spanish woman, and he was given EU, European Union passport and Spanish citizenship by virtue of marrying her. So he would list Mexican, Spanish on his application when he applied for American citizenship. And down here, this is something they have. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped 11. I didn't. I skipped 10 too. If one of your parents, including that, is a U.S. citizen and they became a U.S. citizen before your 18th birthday, you would check yes. And if you answered yes, you might already be a U.S. citizen, and you shouldn't really be completing this form. You should be using an N600 form. So this is one more check on that. But if neither one of your parents is a U.S. citizen, or if they became a citizen after you turned 18, you'd answer no. On 11, this pertains to, or this is referencing people who have a disability that they're going to need some help or accommodations, or that might keep them from being able to understand the English language or civics requirements for naturalization. And that might be a mental issue or whatever, but this would be a physical or developmental disability that might impair that. And you would answer. And if you have to answer that, then you have to include a new form that has a doctor's signature. If you have a question about number 11, please send me a text and we can go over that. Now, Social Security update, and this is something new on this form, which I think is great. You should, once you become a U.S. citizen, formally, you had to go through a separate step to notify the Social Security Administration that you're a citizen and no longer an immigrant or here as a lawful permanent resident. It changes your status, which is very important when you apply for benefits later on down the road. So this is good. They take care of it for you. If you want them to do that, you say yes, and you give them your social security number and you check yes here that you're giving them authorization to talk to the social security and tell them you're a citizen. So anyway, there you go. So if you answer yes here, you have to answer yes here. Biographic information, ethnicity and race. Ethnicity and race. Ethnicity means they're interested to know if you're Hispanic or Latino or you're not. And for this, obviously Hispanic, somebody who comes from a Spanish culture, like from Spain or anywhere, Mexico, Central America, South America, except for Brazil, is Hispanic. Latino includes people who are, living in Brazil. They're considered Latinos, but you're either Hispanic, Latino, or you're not. Race. Now, they've only given 5 options for race here. I wish they gave it more, but you need to check all the boxes that you think apply to you. And the very first box is American Indian or Alaskan Native, but American Indian refers to any indigenous or native tribal member of a tribe in North or Central or North America, North, Central, or South America, rather. So if you are from an Indian tribe in Guatemala or Chiapas, Mexico, or you would check this first box if you pertain to that. But I will say that this is up to you. What you answer here is what you feel is appropriate for you as your race. People who are from northern North Africa and the Middle East, for the purposes of these options, are considered white. They may never have considered themselves white, but for this form, that's if they're from Egypt or they were from Iraq or Iran, they would check white. If they are from India, Nepal, Pakistan, Bhutan, they would Bangladesh, they would check Asian because they're South Asian. Anyway, if you have a question about race and want to talk about it a little bit with me, send me a text and we can. Your height, feet in inches, your weight in pounds, and be aware people's weights change. So if you put down that you're 200 pounds and you go on a diet and at the time of your interview you're down to 150, congratulations, but it's not going to make a problem. All right. So put your current weight here, irrespective of that. Your eye color, and here you can only choose one. Hair color, and you only choose one. And if you are a person and you decide to dye your hair, that's okay. It's whatever color your hair is when you're applying, okay? Information about your residence. Residence means where do you live at night? Where do you sleep at night? Where do you live? Where's your stuff? Doesn't mean what do you own the house? Do you rent? Is the house lease or the mortgage in your name? That's not what they're asking. They're asking where you live. And you put down your current address. And maybe you're living with somebody. And if you are living with somebody, this is where you would put in care of, say you're living with your brother. You would put down in care of your brother's name, the street address. But if you're not, you'd put in it. Excuse me. You put NA here for not applicable. Street number, city, town, state, and here's something that they have changed. Now, when they put down zip code, they only need the 5-digit zip code. The old forms, they wanted 5 plus 4, which required you looking that up. They did away with that, which is good. It's just the 5-digit zip code. Now, this line right here for province, postal code, and country only applies if you're living outside the country. And only in those certain situations where maybe you're working for the US consulate in Manila, Philippines, so you would have a province, postal code, and country. But since it doesn't apply, for anybody living in the United States right now, you just put NA, NA, NA here. Now, your date of residence will be, when did you move there? And again, month, day, and year. When did you move to present? So this is where you're living now, your current, where you're living now, residence. And they've given you a spot for 3 more previous residents, places that you lived before. And be very careful on these dates, from and to. This to date should be like the day before this one. And, it should match so there aren't any gaps, huge gaps. When you move from one place to another, it's possible that there might be a couple of days where you're in transit. That's okay. But try to keep that gap on these residents as tight as possible. Also include in here, if for some reason you lived in a dorm or a residence or a shelter or something, or maybe you were sleeping on a family member's sofa for 6 months while you were getting a job. I don't know. It's where you sleep, not the ownership or the possession or whatever. That's what they're interested in. But you need to establish where you are living. They want to know the physical address, the number in the street and the apartment number or whatever, the city or town, the state, the zip code. The country, of course, would be US here, as you would fill this out. If you need more spaces than this, go to part 14. And again, you'd reference the page 3, part 4, and give them the same information and fill it out. Okay. Is your current physical address also your current mailing address? Is this where you're getting your mail? And if it is, and you answer yes, you can skip on to part 5. But if you're getting your mail someplace else, like a post office box or something, here's where you would fill that in. All right. Part 5, information about your marital history. What is your current marital status? If you've never been married, you're single. But if you're married now, you check here. But if you're divorced, even if you're now single, this is what you would check: divorced. Widowed means that your spouse died. Maybe you're separated. You never really got divorced, but you're living apart. You would check separated. Marriage annulled, you would check that. If you're currently married, is your spouse a current member of the U.S. Armed Forces? Yes or no? How many times have you been married? And if you answer anything above 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, you know you're going to have to provide all of the information for those previous marriages. And all the information would be, provide the current marriage certificate and any divorce decree, annulment decree, or death certificate that your prior marriages were terminated. So you have to provide those, all right? So if you're currently married, but you were divorced before or they died, you would have to provide that divorce decree and the death certificate. So you have to provide those documents when you apply. And again, only send it in copies, never send the original. And everything has to be in English, translated. So if you have questions about any of this, gets a little complicated, send me a text. On your current marriage, you have to provide your husband or wife's name, their birth date, the date they were married, and is your current spouse present address the same or different than yours? And when did your current spouse become a U.S. citizen? Well, um, by birth, they were born here, or by other would be the date they became a spouse, or they became a citizen, when they became a citizen. And this information then, if for some reason, if they're by birth, then you would NA here. So information about your status, your current spouse's alien registration number, if any, that would be their A number. If they are not, you'd put NA here. How many times has your current spouse been married? And again, if it's anything greater than one, you have to provide all pertinent information. Okay. You have to provide their previous divorce decree or death certificate. And if they've been married more than once, you have to provide that for each of the marriages. So this could be quite complicated if they've been married more than once and require quite a bit of information from you. Your current spouse's current employer or company, and if they are not working, you just put NA or not employed or retired or something. You only have to answer number 8 if you're filing Part 1, Item 1D, the spouse of a U.S. citizen qualified or employed outside the United States. So if they aren't, it's NA, okay? Information about children, and they're wanting, this is something else they've changed. They're wanting to know the total number of children who are under 18 years of age at this time when you're filling this out. So if you have 5 kids, and one's 21, one's 20, one's 17, one's 16, one's 12, you'd only list the 3 that are under 18. So the number would be 3. And you have to give the children's ages here. And if you need more, whether they live with you, all right. And it tells you what the valid answers could be here. Their birth date, again, month, day, and year. And are you providing support for this child? Yes or no? And this means, is your household, like you and your husband's providing support? Yes. And if you have more than 3 children under 18 years of age, the additional children, put them in 14 and reference the page number, the part, and item 2. Part number 7, information about your employment and schools you've attended. And this is where you'd list where you've worked and attended school full time. And if you need more than 3 here, you'd go to part 14 and reference page 5, part 7, question 1 or item 1. Volunteer work doesn't apply. Schools, if you're going to school like at Intercambio taking English, I wouldn't put that down either. This is just like formal education, real schools, real colleges. Time outside the United States. And now this can require quite a bit of homework but in the past 5 years or 3 years, if you're married to a U.S. citizen, they want to know how many times you left the country. And what they're trying to do there is determine, was there any year you were outside the country more than 6 months? Because if there was, maybe you haven't been a resident long enough to qualify for citizenship. All right, so they want the date you left, the date you returned, and what country you went to, you traveled through. And list these up. And if you traveled by air, maybe your passport got stamped and you can use that. Otherwise, you might need to start looking in such things as your social postings in Instagram or Facebook or something. Go to the bank and see when you drew out money. That would tell you dates you were out of the country. If you pulled your kids out of school to go on a trip, they have to have records of that in your school, and they never get rid of those records. So you could go back 5 years easily and get the dates if you pulled your kids out of school to travel, that sort of thing. If you took vacation from your employer, they keep those records too, and you can get those dates that you took vacation and figure out. So do your best to come up with these dates. If you need some help brainstorming ideas or coming up with ways you can fill in this information, send me a text and maybe I can come up with some ideas for you. Part 9 is what used to be called Part 12 in the old form. And this is the part that refers to what kind of person are you? Are you a person of good moral character? And be aware that these questions include the word ever, and that means at any time, anywhere in the world. not just in the last 3 or 5 years, okay? If they ask ever, they mean ever. Also, be aware that you should be telling the truth. I'm sure you would, but be aware that they're going to do a background check on you, and in some cases, they even contact your foreign contacts in foreign countries to check on things. So if it's warranted, not always, just sometimes. So it's possible. So tell the truth. It's better that you tell the truth and you give them an explanation than you lie or say, don't answer truthfully, because assume they will find out. So, for example, have you ever claimed to be a US citizen in writing or any other way? Maybe a job application or something. Have you ever registered to vote? And you know that you can't vote unless you're a citizen, but did you register? You currently owe any overdue taxes. And overdue means be aware that taxes aren't due for last year, 2023, for example, until April 15th, 2024. So technically, like today, it's the 2nd of April for me, recording this video. Taxes for 2023 aren't overdue yet. So overdue means you've passed the date in which the taxes were due for that year. Rather than go through and read all of these, I think what I'd like you to do is, as you're going through these, if you don't understand the wording or the intent on any of these, and you have a question about them, send me a text. And if it's a complicated situation, maybe I'll set up just a one-on-one Zoom and we can talk about particulars. But rather than me read over these, you can read over them yourself. Now, what they're expecting is a no answer on almost all of these in this section. If you should answer yes, what you need to do is provide a written explanation in part 14. And you're going to reference the page number, the part, and the item number, the question number, and explain why you're answering yes. There may be a very good reason why you answered yes. For example, maybe you were in the a question about using firearms or something. Well, maybe you were in the army of your previous country that you left because you honorably served. And of course, you had to use a gun. There may be a good reason. Just simply answering yes to any of these doesn't mean you can't be a citizen. It just means they want more information. And you can provide that information in part 14. I'm going down here. So that was down to 30. From 31 to 37, they're expecting a yes answer on these because these are questions that are basically that you will be swearing to when you take the oath of citizenship. So they want to make sure you understood what these are saying and that you agree with them. So questions 1 through 30, if you answer yes, you need to explain why. Questions 31 through 37, they're expecting you to answer yes. So if you answer yes here, you don't have to provide an explanation. That's what they want to hear. Part 10 is this request for fee reduction, and this is based on your household income and how it applies or falls with the federal poverty guidelines. And the federal poverty guidelines, I gave you a link where you can go and look them up in the handbook. And I'll go over the fees in just a little bit and confirm that. But the federal poverty guidelines, 400% of the federal poverty guidelines are really quite generous when for a family of four, for example, it's $124,800. So if your income is under $124,800, that's the amount that you would have claimed on your income tax, then you can still get that fee cut in half. But this is how you would fill it out. Yes, my household income did follow that. Or no, it didn't follow that. And if you answer no, you just skip on to 11. 11 is your contact information. How do they get a hold of you? Your daytime phone number, your mobile number, your email address. And if your daytime phone number is the same as your mobile number, you can just put it, you can put both numbers here if you wish, or put NA and just put your mobile. Or if you don't have a mobile, you put how can they get a hold of you during the day, and in your email address if you have one. If you don't, put NA. And here is where you actually sign and you certify, and it says under penalty of perjury, which means you're swearing to tell the truth and that the information that you swear that is everything's true. This is where you sign and you give the date when you mail it in. If you had to use an interpreter to fill out this form, the interpreter would fill out this part of the form. If you hired somebody like a lawyer to fill out the form, which most people don't, but this is where they would fill it out. So you wouldn't have to fill out either one of these if you didn't use them. You'd just put NA in these spaces, NA. And then part 14 is where you provide that additional information that maybe you have 4 kids instead of 3, or you've lived in 8 places instead of whatever number they gave you, or you've been outside the country more than 6 times. The additional information you need to provide, this is where you would provide that information, okay? And you reference the page number, the part number, the item number, or the question number here, and then give them exactly the same information they were asking in that section. And if you had to answer more than these 5 additional pieces of information, you have take an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper and put up at the top of it part 14 and just copy the same information that you're giving here in the additional spots that you would need to provide, and include that with your application. So you don't complete part 15 or 16 until somebody at the USCIS tells you to do it, like at your interview or when you take the oath of allegiance. And that's the whole form. It's simpler than the old form was. I think they've eliminated some of the questions that were not appropriate anymore. So they've made it, I think it's a better form. But if you have any question as you're reading over this, you know what to do. Send me a text. All right, so I've been talking about the fee several times. I mentioned it in the last class. I'm going to go over it again now. I think it's important, and I'll explain it. And again, as we're going over the fee, here we go. Going over the fee. If you have a question about it and how it pertains specifically for you to you, send me a text, and I can organize if I need to, we can do a Zoom call and I can explain things. But the new fee, which went into effect April 1st, is $760 when you send it in by mail. If you want to do it online, it's $710. You can reduce that fee down from $760 to $380, cut it in half, if your documented annual household income, that means what you pay taxes on, is greater than 150% and not more than 400%. So for a family of 4, mom and dad and 2 kids, if your household income is between $46,800 and $124,800, you can get that fee cut down to $380. Significant savings. But if your household income is less than 150, for example, a family of 4, if your household income is $46,799 or less, you can have the fee wiped out, no fee whatsoever to apply for citizenship. But if you do that, you need to include this form, this I-912 form with your application. All right. So if you have a question about your fee, what it's going to be at the time you are sending in your application, it's complicated, I know. I'll be happy to go over it with you in detail, specific for you. But be aware that, it can be less than the $760 if you're mailing in your application, which is worth pursuing for any of us. So that's what I wanted to cover in today's class. And most of this is, all of it is in the handbook as well. Go over it in detail. If there's anything you have a question about, I'm available. Send me a text. And as I've said before, thank you for what you're doing. It is important to us and to the country. It's important to you, of course. It's important to your family, but it's important to the rest of us too. And thank you for what you're doing. And good night. Look forward to seeing you next Wednesday.